The silent janitor. Daniel's footsteps echoed softly in the long, empty hallway. The building was huge, glass walls shining under the dim night lights. Everyone had already gone home. The only man left was him, the janitor. His mop squeaked across. The polished floor and his bucket of water rolled quietly beside him. To most people, he was invisible, just another worker cleaning after hours. But inside, Daniel carried stories no one could imagine. Daniel was a single dad. Every night, after working late shifts, he would walk back to his small apartment where his little daughter Lily waited for him. She was only 8 years old, thin and fragile, often sick with a cough that never seemed to leave her. He would sit by her bed, brush her hair gently, and tell her stories about the stars. She would smile, even when her chest hurt, because she loved the way her father spoke about the universe. But Daniel never told her everything. He never told anyone. To everyone in the company, he was just the janitor. No one cared about his past, and he never offered to share it. He kept his head down, worked quietly, and tried to survive. The executives of the building barely noticed him. In fact, when they did notice, it was often cruel. They laughed at him, mocked his old shoes, or scolded him for being in the way. Daniel never argued back. He simply nodded, moved aside, and continued his work. People thought he was weak. People thought he was silent because he had nothing to say. But that night, something strange happened. As Daniel cleaned the floor near the top conference room, he heard voices, strange voices. They weren't like the usual chatter of executives. These voices were sharp, heavy, and filled with sounds that did not belong to Earth. At first, Daniel thought it was just the television left on inside. But when he leaned closer, his body froze. He knew those words. His heart began to race. He gripped the mop tightly, his breath shaking. For years, he had buried this part of himself. For years, he had hidden from who he once was. And yet here, it was again echoing down the hall, alien language. Daniel stepped closer to the door, moving quietly so no one would hear him. His ears picked up every syllable, every strange tone. To anyone else it would have sounded like noise, hissing, clicking, and deep echoes. But to Daniel, it was as clear as English. He understood it. He remembered it. The voices inside the room were not just speaking. They were negotiating, talking about promises, warnings, and power. Daniel's eyes widened as he caught one specific phrase. The humans must prove trust, or the stars will turn cold. He staggered back, pressing against the wall. His mind spun. How could this be? Why here? Why now? Then he heard footsteps approaching. The conference room door swung open. A group of executives walked out looking pale, nervous, whispering to each other. None of them noticed Daniel standing in the shadows, clutching his mop like it was a weapon. They passed him without a glance, their voices trembling. Daniel knew something they didn't know. He knew exactly what those voices meant. He knew who they belonged to. But he said nothing. He forced himself to lower his head and keep cleaning. His hands shook, but his face stayed calm. He had learned long ago how to hide his true self. As he worked, flashes of memory returned. A space station, a team of scientists, him, younger, braver, standing before alien beings and speaking their tongue. His wife beside him, smiling with pride. And then, the fire, the screams, the tragedy that took everything away from him. He had left it all behind. He had promised never to return to that world, but now it had returned to him. When he finally went home that night, Lily was waiting. She coughed softly, then smiled when she saw him. "Daddy, did you see the stars today?" she asked. Daniel knelt beside her bed, brushing her hair back. His heart ached, but he smiled. "Yes, Lily," he whispered. "The stars were watching us." She yawned, holding his hand. "One day." I want to see them too. Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her the truth, that the stars were not just lights, that voices from beyond were closer than she thought. But instead, he kissed her forehead and tucked her in. That night, as she slept, Daniel sat by the window staring at the sky. His reflection showed a tired man, dressed in janitor clothes, but his eyes held secrets older than the building he worked in. He whispered in a language no one else on earth could understand, a prayer to the stars, a warning to himself. And deep inside, he knew this silence would not last long. Cliffhanger. The janitor who had spent years hiding was about to be pulled back into a world where his voice could decide the fate of Earth. The first encounter. The next morning, Daniel moved through the hallways with his mop and bucket as if nothing had happened. His uniform smelled faintly of bleach, his shoes squeaked against the polished floor, and the executives still ignored him. But inside, his mind was not quiet. He kept hearing those alien words, those strange sentences that no one else could have understood. They echoed in his skull like a forgotten song. Daniel's heart felt heavy. He had promised himself he would never get involved again. After his wife's death, he had left all of that behind. The research projects, the secret missions, the alien languages that only he could translate. He had buried it all, locking it away so he could live as a simple janitor and raise his daughter in peace. But peace was fragile. Last night proved that it would not last forever. By afternoon, the building became restless. Men in black suits carried briefcases. Executives whispered in groups. Security guards tightened their patrols. Something big was about to happen. Daniel noticed everything, though he pretended not to. He cleaned the floors slowly, eyes lowered, listening carefully. The top-floor boardroom was decorated for something special. Long glass table, leather chairs, screens glowing blue. Daniel was sent up to mop the edges of the hall outside, but as always, he was invisible to them. Nobody questioned him. Nobody thought a janitor could matter. Then the air changed. It was subtle at first, a vibration under the floor, a low hum in the walls. Daniel's skin prickled, his heart racing. The sound grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat. The lights flickered once, twice. Executives grew pale, and then the doors at the far end of the hall slid open. They arrived. 3 tall figures stepped into the building. Their forms were hidden under long silver cloaks, but their eyes glowed faintly like molten metal. Their movements were not human, smooth, precise, graceful in a way that made everyone else look clumsy. The air around them felt heavier, charged, with unseen energy. Executives gasped. Some even stepped back. Translators were rushed forward, machines and devices switched on to decode the alien language. But the moment the aliens spoke, chaos followed. Their voices were not like human speech. It was a mix of deep tones, clicking patterns, and layered sounds that overlapped. The devices scrambled, screens flashed error codes. The translators shook their heads helplessly. No response detected. Signal unreadable. System failure. The executives panicked. Billions of dollars were at stake. Treaties depended on this, and yet no one could understand a single word. The aliens stood silently, their glowing eyes scanning the room, their patience clearly running thin. Daniel, standing in the corner with his mop, felt his chest tighten. He knew every word, every phrase. He could hear the meaning as if they spoke English directly to him. The aliens were not here for money. They were not here for trade. They were here for trust. And if the humans failed to answer, there would be consequences. Daniel's hand trembled. He thought of Lily at home, coughing softly in her bed. He thought of her drawings, the strange symbols she scribbled that looked far too much like alien writing. He thought of what would happen to Earth if this meeting collapsed. Finally, One alien slammed a hand down on the table. The sound was like thunder. The executives flinched. Fear filled the room. One shouted for more translators. Another begged the machines to work. No one noticed the janitor in the corner dropping his mop. Daniel stepped forward. His voice was quiet, steady. For the first time in years, he spoke in the language he had buried. The alien words rolled off his tongue with perfect clarity, smooth and respectful. The sound cut through the panic like a blade. The entire room froze. Executives stared at him in shock, jaws dropping. Security guards reached for their weapons, unsure what was happening. And the aliens, those tall, glowing figures, turned slowly toward Daniel. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the leader of the aliens tilted its head, eyes glowing, brighter. A deep, layered sound escaped its mouth, and for the first time since they arrived, it almost sounded pleased. They answered Daniel. Their words carried warmth, recognition, even respect. They called him by name. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard his name spoken in their tongue since the day his wife died. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm, though inside he was trembling. The executives looked from Daniel to the aliens, too stunned to speak. The janitor they had mocked, the man they had ignored, had just done the impossible. He had spoken fluently to beings. No one else could understand. The aliens leaned closer to him, lowering their hoods. Their faces were not monstrous. They were strange, yes, skin like silver glass, eyes like twin suns, but their expressions were calm. They trusted him. They listened. And Daniel realized something terrifying. They were not here by accident. They were here because of him. Cliffhanger. As the room stood in stunned silence, the alien leader spoke words that froze Daniel's blood. The bridge must be protected. Your daughter carries the key. Shock in the boardroom. The silence inside the boardroom felt heavier than the walls themselves. No one dared to move. The long glass table was lined with nervous executives, their expensive suits looking powerless under the golden glow of the alien visitors. Even the hum of the building's machines seemed to fade away. All eyes locked on Daniel, the janitor who had just spoken the impossible. For years they had mocked him. They had stepped around him as if he were a piece of furniture. They had never cared about the tired man with the mop. And now, that same man stood taller than them all, speaking in a tongue no human on earth could understand. What did he say? One executive finally stammered, his voice cracking with fear. Daniel's throat was dry, but his words were steady. They want trust, not profit, he said quietly, translating their demand. They don't care for contracts, or deals, or numbers. They came to test us! The room erupted in whispers. Some executives leaned closer, others pulled back. Panic spread like fire. The alien leader stepped forward, silver skin glinting beneath the lights. He raised a hand, and the voices stopped at once. Then, in their layered language, he spoke again, directly to Daniel. Daniel listened carefully, his heart pounding. The words felt heavy, almost personal. And when he translated, the air grew colder. "They know my name," he whispered. A gasp moved through the room. "What? How?" The alien leader's glowing eyes fixed on Daniel, unblinking, unshaken. His voice rumbled with authority. Daniel translated again, but his voice wavered this time. They said, "I have walked with them before." Executives turned pale. A few shot angry looks at Daniel, as if his very existence was betrayal. One slammed, a fist on the table. You mean to say you've met them? You knew about this?" Daniel looked at the man, his face calm but his hands clenched. "I knew their language. Once. Long ago. But I never thought I'd hear it again." The executives began arguing loudly, their fear twisting into rage. Some shouted for Daniel to be removed. Others demanded answers. The security guards reached for their weapons, uncertain if the janitor standing before aliens was friend or enemy. But the aliens silenced them all with a single gesture. The leader turned again to Daniel, speaking in tones that echoed across the walls. The words vibrated inside Daniel's chest. His eyes widened. "They speak of my daughter," Daniel said softly, his voice breaking. "They say she is the bridge." Confusion rippled through the humans. "Bridge? What bridge? What does that mean?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Memories crashed into his mind. Lily sitting on her bed, drawing strange symbols on paper. Her soft voice whispering. Sounds that didn't belong to English. The way she sometimes stared at the stars as if she was waiting for them to speak back. The aliens knew. They had known all along. One executive slammed the table again. "This is unacceptable! Are you saying your daughter, your child, has something to do with them? With all of this?" His voice shook with anger, but beneath it was fear. Daniel straightened, his tired frame now seeming stronger than ever. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Yes," he admitted. "My daughter carries something I don't understand. And they've come for her." The room went deadly quiet. Some executives exchanged terrified glances. Others whispered plans, already thinking of experiments, control, and power. The greed in their eyes was unmistakable. Daniel noticed it. He had seen those kinds of eyes before, years ago when his wife was still alive. That same hunger had caused her death. "No," Daniel said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "You will not touch her." The executives sneered at him. "You're a janitor, you have no power here." But before Daniel could respond, the alien leader placed a hand on the table. His voice echoed deeply, resonating like 1,000 drums. The windows shook. The ground trembled. The message was clear. Daniel's words carried more authority than all the men in suits combined. Daniel translated, his voice shaking as he repeated the alien's warning. "If you harm the bridge, your world will fall silent." Gasps filled the room. Executives leaned back in fear, finally realizing the truth. This was no business negotiation. This was survival. Daniel stood in the center, his mop forgotten on the floor, his old janitor uniform glowing under the alien light. For the first time, the men in power were silent before him. But inside, Daniel was not calm. His chest tightened as he thought of Lily, alone at home, fragile and sick. If the aliens knew about her, others would find out too. The government, the military. People who would see her not as a child, but as a weapon. Daniel's jaw tightened. He could not let that happen. The alien leader leaned down slightly, his molten eyes burning into Daniel's. His final words in that moment were not for the executives, not for the room, but for Daniel alone. And when Daniel translated, the entire boardroom fell into stunned silence. They said... Daniel paused, his voice heavy. The fate of 2 worlds depends on her breath. The silence that followed was deafening. Cliffhanger. Daniel knew then he could not keep his daughter hidden any longer. The secret passed. The boardroom emptied slowly, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Executives whispered in tight circles, their eyes darting toward Daniel with suspicion and fear. The janitor no longer looked invisible to them. He looked dangerous. Every step he took was followed by murmurs. Every glance from him made them shift uncomfortably. Daniel ignored them. His mind was not in the boardroom anymore. It was somewhere far away, back in the years he had tried to forget. He walked silently to the janitor's closet, a small, dark space smelling of bleach and old rags. He closed the door behind him, leaned against it, and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he let himself remember. The forgotten years. Long before he became a janitor, Daniel had been part of a secret government program. His gift with languages had caught attention when he was young. While other students struggled with French or German, Daniel could master entire languages in weeks. It wasn't just memory. It was instinct, like he was born to understand. He had been recruited into a team of scientists, linguists, and explorers tasked with humanity's most secret mission, communication with alien life. Most people believed such projects were fantasies, but Daniel knew better. He had stood inside a space station orbiting beyond the moon. He had seen alien crafts up close, shimmering like living creatures. And he had spoken to beings that were not of this world. He hadn't been alone. His wife, Sarah, had been by his side. She was a brilliant astrophysicist with fire in her heart and endless curiosity in her eyes. Together, they had worked on translation systems, building bridges between species. They had believed in peace. They had believed in trust, until the day it all burned. The fire. The memory haunted him every night. A sudden malfunction, or maybe sabotage. He never knew for sure. The station shook violently, alarms screaming, oxygen hissing out through broken seals. Flames licked through the corridors. He had grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the escape pod, but she pushed him forward instead. "Go, Daniel!" she had shouted through the smoke. "Go! Save yourself!" He had tried to fight her, but she pushed him inside and sealed the door. His last sight of her was through the window, her face determined, her eyes filled with love. The fire swallowed her before the pod launched. Daniel had returned to Earth, broken, hollow, and furious. The government had tried to keep him, but he walked away. He wanted no more secrets, no more stars, no more loss. He had promised himself he would raise their daughter quietly, far from the dangers of alien contact, but fate was cruel. The present pain, now, years later, those same beings had returned, speaking of his daughter. The bridge, they called her. Daniel's hands shook as he remembered the words. His daughter, Lily, was no soldier, no weapon. She was a fragile child with weak lungs and gentle dreams. She loved crayons, bedtime stories, and hot cocoa. How could she possibly carry the fate of two worlds? Daniel pressed his face into his hands. He couldn't let them take her. He couldn't let history repeat itself. But deep down, he knew there was something different about Lily. He had seen it in the way she drew strange patterns on her school notebooks, symbols no teacher could recognize. He had heard it in the way she whispered in her sleep, sounds that reminded him of alien chants. And once, just once, he had caught her humming a melody he had heard only on the space station, from the voices of beings not of Earth. He had tried to convince himself it was imagination, but now the aliens had confirmed it. She carried something. Inside her, something greater than both of them. The threat. Inside the walls, Daniel's thoughts were broken by the sound of footsteps outside the closet door. He stiffened, listening. Voices murmured in sharp tones. He's hiding something. The janitor knows more than he admits. What if his daughter really is connected? We can't let them take her. She belongs to us now. Daniel's stomach turned cold. The executives were already plotting. They didn't see Lily as a child. They saw her as an asset, a tool, a weapon to control. He gripped the handle of his mop like it was a blade. For years he had bowed his head, swallowed their insults, and stayed invisible. But now, if they tried to touch his daughter, he would not stay silent. The return of the aliens. Suddenly the walls vibrated again. The same hum from before filled the air. The aliens had not left. They had been waiting. Daniel rushed back to the boardroom, and sure enough, the three beings still stood there, watching with patient eyes. The executives were restless, sweating under the weight of their presence. The leader of the aliens raised his hand, pointing, not at the executives, but directly at Daniel. "You," the voice echoed, layered and deep. "You must bring her." "The bridge is ready!" Gasps filled the room. The executives turned in shock, whispers sharp and venomous. Daniel's chest tightened. He shook his head slowly. "She's just a child," he said, his voice breaking. "She's sick. She's fragile. You can't put this on her." But the alien's reply cut through his resistance. "Her voice will heal more than you know. Without her, both our worlds will fall." The executives leaned forward, greedy light in their eyes. One muttered, "We'll send men to collect her." Immediately, Daniel's jaw locked. Rage boiled in his veins. He stepped forward, his voice louder than ever before. "No one touches my daughter." The aliens stayed silent, but their glowing eyes flickered with something Daniel recognized. Respect. The daughter's gift. The city outside looked calm under the night sky, but Daniel's heart was a storm. He rushed through the quiet streets, every step heavy with fear. The words of the alien leader repeated in his head like thunder. "The bridge must be protected. Your daughter carries the key." His mind spun with questions. How could Lily, his small, fragile child, be the answer to something so massive? She was barely 8 years old, sickly, coughing at night, barely strong enough to climb the stairs without losing her breath. And yet, there had always been something different about her. When he finally reached their small apartment, Daniel pushed open the door, panting from the run. Inside, Lily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered around her, papers filled with drawings. She looked up and smiled weakly, her big eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Daddy, you're home early," she said softly. Daniel knelt beside her, his chest aching at the sight of her innocence. The drawings spread across the floor weren't just random scribbles. They were symbols, lines, circles, and shapes that curved like constellations. He froze. His blood ran cold. They weren't random at all. They were the same patterns he had, seen years ago, etched onto alien ships, carved into walls deep inside space stations. The same symbols he had once studied with Sarah. "Lily," his voice trembled. "Where did you learn this?" She tilted her head, her voice quiet. "I don't know. They just come into my dreams. The stars talk to me sometimes, Daddy. They tell me stories." Daniel's hands shook as he gathered the papers. Every line was perfect, precise, far beyond the skill of a child. He looked at her, his throat tight. "You can understand them?" he asked carefully. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes. It feels like I already know the words, even before I write them. Like they live inside me." Daniel's heart cracked open. Sarah's face flashed before his eyes, her final words echoing, "Go, Daniel. Save yourself." And now, he realized, Sarah had not just given her life for him, she had left a part of her mission inside their daughter. The arrival, before he could say more, the lights in the apartment flickered. A strange hum filled the air, low and steady, like a vibration running through the walls. Daniel's breath caught. He knew that sound. The aliens were near. Lily looked up, her face calm, almost expectant. "They're coming, Daddy." Daniel rushed to the window, pulling the curtain aside. In the distance, he saw them. 3 tall figures glowing faintly under the moonlight, walking through the dark street, toward their home. Behind them, headlights flared. Black cars screeched to a stop. Armed men in suits spilled out, weapons drawn. The government. The executives had moved faster than he expected. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had to make a choice. The standoff, the Front door rattled under heavy fists. "Open up!" a voice barked. "Federal authority!" Lily clutched his arm, her small fingers trembling. "Daddy, what's happening?" Daniel swallowed hard, pulling her close. His mind raced. He had spent years hiding, but there was no hiding now. Both sides had found them, humans and aliens, and both wanted Lily. The door burst open with a crash. Armed men stormed inside, guns raised. At the same moment, the aliens stepped into the room, their silver skin glowing, their presence filling the air with otherworldly power. The humans shouted, "Step away from the girl." The aliens responded in their layered voices, "She is not yours." Daniel's body moved before he thought. He stood in front of Lily, arms spread wide, shielding her from both sides. His voice roared louder than it ever had before. "No one touches my daughter!" For a second, everything froze. Guns pointed, alien eyes glowed. Lily's small hand clutched his shirt, and then something impossible happened. The gift revealed, Lily stepped forward. Her little feet moved past Daniel, her head held high. The glow from the aliens reflected in her wide eyes. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in her life, she spoke. Not in English, not in any human language. She spoke in the alien tongue. The words came out soft but clear, layered like theirs, echoing with power. The entire room froze. Humans, aliens, even Daniel. The armed men lowered their weapons slightly, confused. The aliens dropped to one knee, their heads bowed in reverence. Daniel's chest tightened with tears he refused to let fall. His silent daughter, the child who had never spoken more than a whisper, was speaking fluently, her voice filling the room with warmth. The symbols on her drawings began to glow faintly, lifting off the paper, floating in the air like silver sparks. They swirled around her, forming shapes, constellations, bridges of light. "She is the bridge," the alien leader declared, his voice trembling with awe. Daniel could barely breathe. He wanted to scoop her up, to protect her, but he also knew this was bigger than him. This was bigger than Earth. Lily turned back to him, her small face calm, her voice soft but steady. "Don't be afraid, Daddy. I finally know what I am." The choice? But the humans weren't convinced. One of the agents snarled, raising his weapon again. "She's not a bridge! She's a weapon! Take her!" The aliens rose to their feet, their glowing hands raised in warning. Energy hummed in, the air ready to explode into violence. Daniel stepped forward, rage burning in his chest. "You'll have to go through me first." The room teetered on the edge of chaos, and in the middle of it all, Lily's glowing symbols circled the ceiling, pulsing like stars, waiting for her command, betrayal and courage. The air inside the small apartment crackled with tension. Shadows from the floating alien symbols danced across the walls, shimmering like fireflies made of starlight. Lily stood in the center, glowing softly, her lips still moving in the alien tongue. The soldiers' hands trembled around their weapons, unsure if they were pointing guns at a child or something far greater. Daniel's heart pounded like a war drum. He kept one arm protectively in front of his daughter, but deep inside, he knew she no longer needed his shield the way she once did. She was changing. She was stepping into something much larger than either of them had ever imagined. "Take her!" One of the agents barked again, voice sharp with fear, but before they could move, the alien leader raised his hand. A wave of invisible force pushed through the room, knocking weapons aside like they were made of plastic toys. Sparks burst from the guns, disabling them. The humans stumbled backward, shouting in panic. "She is not yours," the alien thundered. "She belongs to the stars." The agents froze, their orders clashing with fear. But one of the executives, who had followed secretly behind the soldiers, stepped forward. His expensive suit glimmered in the dim light, his eyes sharp with greed. Daniel recognized him instantly. Mr. Carver, one of the most powerful men in the company. the kind of man who had mocked Daniel for years, laughing at the janitor scrubbing his floors. Now his voice was like poison. She is not a child. She is a key, and keys are meant to be used. Daniel's blood boiled. He stepped forward, fists clenched. She is my daughter, not your property. Carver smirked. Do you think you can protect her forever, janitor? You couldn't even protect your wife. The words hit Daniel like a blade to the chest. The room blurred for a second. His wife's last moments flashing before his eyes, her pushing him into the escape pod, her face swallowed by fire. Daniel's rage snapped. The betrayal. While the soldiers hesitated, Carver revealed his plan. He pulled out a small device from his coat, a glowing cube humming with strange energy. Daniel's eyes widened. He recognized it immediately. It was alien technology. Carver smirked at Daniel's shock. You're not the only one who remembers the past. We've been collecting pieces for years. And now, thanks to your little girl, we'll finally unlock it. Daniel's stomach twisted. The government had lied. They had always known more. They had been preparing for this moment, waiting for someone like Lily to appear. The cube began to glow brighter, sending pulses of energy that made Lily stumble. She held her head, wincing in pain, as if the device was pulling something out of her. Stop it! Daniel roared, rushing forward. But soldiers grabbed him, pinning his arms behind his back. Carver laughed coldly. Look at you. Once a brilliant linguist, now reduced to a janitor. You think you matter? You are nothing but a stepping stone. Your daughter is the real prize. Daniel struggled, fury burning in his chest. But then, something inside him shifted. The years of silence, of humiliation, of burying his past, all of it cracked open. He wasn't just a janitor. He wasn't just a broken man. He was a father, and no force on earth or beyond would take his daughter. The courage Lily. Daniel shouted, his voice shaking the walls. Fight it! You're stronger than them, stronger than me. You don't belong to them, you belong to yourself. His words cut through the chaos. Lily looked up, her eyes wide, glowing faintly with silver light. She took a shaky step forward, her small hands clutching the air. The floating alien symbols swirled faster, gathering around her like a shield. A deep hum filled the room, stronger than Carver's device. Papers flew off tables, glass cracked, the very air shimmered. No! Carver screamed, pressing the cube harder, but the device sparked violently, overwhelmed by the power Lily was releasing. The soldiers dropped Daniel in panic as the entire room trembled. The aliens stepped back, watching in awe. Lily's voice rose, speaking in perfect alien fluency, her words layered and powerful. The cube shattered in Carver's hands, blasting him backward into the wall. He collapsed, coughing, his eyes wide with terror. The soldiers fled, weapons abandoned, and in the middle of the chaos, Daniel stood tall, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on his daughter. She was glowing brighter than ever, the bridge the aliens had spoken of. When the storm of light faded, Lily collapsed into his arms, exhausted but alive. Daniel held her tightly, tears streaming down his face. You did it, he whispered into her hair. You saved yourself. You saved us. The alien leader stepped closer, his voice quieter now, filled with respect. Her courage shines because of yours. You stood when others would bow. She is the bridge, but you are her anchor. Daniel closed his eyes, holding his daughter close. He had lost Sarah, but he would not lose Lily, not to the aliens, not to the humans, not to anyone. The looming choice, but even as relief washed over him, Daniel knew this was not the end. Carver was still alive, glaring at them with hateful eyes. And beyond the walls of their small apartment, the world would soon learn of Lily's gift. Governments, armies, and powers beyond imagination would come for her. Daniel tightened his hold on Lily. He had faced betrayal. He had found courage, but now came the hardest part. He would have to choose, keep running to protect his daughter, or stand and let the world see what she truly was. A final silence. The city was quiet under the weight of midnight. Daniel carried Lily in his arms, her head resting weakly against his shoulder. Her glow had faded, but faint sparks still lingered around her like fireflies that refused to die. Every step Daniel took felt heavier, but his grip on her never loosened. Behind him, the apartment was left in ruins, broken walls, shattered glass, unconscious soldiers, and Carver lying in the corner, defeated but still breathing. Ahead of him stretched an uncertain future. Daniel's mind spun. He wanted nothing more than to run far away, to hide his daughter from the eyes of both aliens and men. But deep down, he knew hiding was no longer possible. The bridge had spoken. Lily had revealed herself, and the world would come looking. As he reached the empty street, the aliens stepped forward, their tall forms shimmering under the pale moonlight. They looked at Lily with reverence, but also with urgency. The leaders, voice deep and layered, cut through the silence. It has begun. The child carries the song of two worlds. She cannot be hidden. Daniel tightened his hold, his jaw firm. She is not your weapon. She is not their weapon. She is just my daughter. The alien leader bowed his head slightly, surprising him. We do not see her as weapon. We see her as voice. And when she speaks, silence will follow. Silence of war or silence of peace. The choice is hers. The gathering. Moments later, headlights flared in the distance. Black cars lined the street, and armored trucks blocked the exit. Soldiers in helmets poured out, their boots pounding the pavement. Helicopters hovered overhead, their searchlights cutting across the night. The government had come in full force. Daniel set Lily down gently on her feet. She looked so small against the army gathered before them, but her eyes were steady. She squeezed his hand once, her voice a whisper only he could hear. Daddy, I'm not afraid anymore. Daniel's chest ached with pride and terror at the same time. He wanted to tell her to hide behind him, to let him shield her. But he knew better. This was her moment. Carver emerged from one of the cars, his suit torn, his face pale, but his eyes burning with greed. He pointed at Lily, his voice cold and sharp. Take her! Soldiers raised their weapons. The aliens stepped forward, their glowing hands pulsing with energy. The air grew hot, electric, seconds from erupting into bloodshed, and then Lily let go of her father's hand. The voice of the bridge. She stepped into the middle of the street, her thin frame bathed in the glow of both headlights and alien light. Everyone froze, weapons trained, breaths held. Lily opened her mouth. Her voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. She spoke in both tongues at once, human and alien, woven together in harmony. Every word rang with truth, echoing off the walls, piercing into hearts. You see me as weapon. You see me as tool, but I am neither. I am voice. Symbols burst into the air around her, glowing brighter, spinning faster, forming bridges of light across the sky. Helicopters faltered, their engines choking. Soldiers dropped their weapons, their ears ringing with the strange melody that filled the night. Even the aliens bent their heads, their glowing eyes shimmering with awe. Daniel could only stare, tears streaming down his face. His silent daughter, who had never spoken a full sentence before, now stood between armies and spoke with the authority of stars. The silence. When her final word left her lips, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The lights of the city dimmed, the roar of helicopters faded, and for one heartbeat, absolute silence covered everything. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of listening. For the first time, humans and aliens alike had no argument, no weapon, no plan. Only silence, and the weight of a child's voice echoing in their hearts. The aftermath carver collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. The soldiers lowered their weapons completely, some even stepping back with tears in their eyes, as if they had been freed from chains they didn't know they carried. The alien leader stepped forward, bowing deeply to Lily. "The bridge has spoken. Two worlds will live or die by the silence she creates." Lily swayed, exhausted. Daniel rushed forward, scooping her back into his arms. She buried her face against his chest, whispering softly, "Did I do good, Daddy?" Daniel held her tightly, his voice breaking. "You did more than good. You did what no one else could." The final moment as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and red, the armies pulled back. The aliens turned toward the rising sun, their cloaks shimmering. One of them looked back at Daniel. "She has chosen peace for now, but remember, silence is fragile. Protect it well." And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the aliens vanished into the morning light. Daniel stood in the empty street holding his daughter, surrounded by silence. The executives were gone, the soldiers retreating, the city eerily calm. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his past lift. He was no longer just a janitor. He was no longer a man broken by loss. He was the father of the bridge, but to him she was still just Lily, his little girl. Ending. Daniel kissed the top of her head as the sun rose. The world would forever remember the night a janitor's daughter silenced armies and spoke for two worlds. But for him, the only truth that mattered was this: sometimes the quietest child carries the loudest gift, and in that silence, the world finally listened.